I made a tour that follows the route of all the events and places mentioned in the book The Parish and the Hill by Mary Doyle Curran. It was written in 1940. It has as background Holyoke and her family, and she talks about her life when she was young. She was born about, I think, 1913, and so thus a lot of events happened in the 19 teens, 1920s, 1930s. Now, her book is divided, so the first half is very bright and the second half is very dark. And the first half, she goes off a lot of places with her grandfather, and then she also goes a few places with her father and mother. So the first time she's grown up as a little girl. And what we're going to do is I have 10 stops on this tour. The first stop is Pulaski Park, and in that year, I think that was the first full year of this park being called Pulaski Park. Now, she's an Irish American. Her grandfather was born in Ireland, and he had brought her to Pulaski Park a lot of times to see the people walking around. There used to be a lot more people in Pulaski Park back then. And the novel mentions along the way other places, of course. Her relationship with her grandfather in this novel was the best part of the book, in my opinion. The reason why is that she loved her grandfather greatly. She would come with him after church on Sundays to Pulaski Park and walk around, and they would see a lot of scenes. They would talk about the Polish people that were around here and how life at Holyoke was changed, how it has changed from the days that he was a worker. And he was a worker in a Parsons paper mill that used to be quite near Pulaski Park. And what we're going to do now, we're going to drive around Veterans Park. And Veterans Park is going to be on our right the whole time. And she mentioned going to Veterans Park after a few of the masses and visiting it and sitting down with her grandfather and sometimes her mother and father. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to St. Jerome's Church, and that's the church that she used when she was a young child. So from the age of 6, when she would have made her first communion, she would have been a parishioner after that, up until a certain age when she moved up to Holy Cross. Now, so that's Veterans Park, and now in front of us is the St. Jerome's Church, and this is where she had gone to Mass with her parents often. And then, of course, she would walk out the stores around here and then walk up to their house. They used to live in the downtown part of Holyoke when she was a very young child. And then as she got older, still fairly young, she moved uptown into the Highlands. So this is a story of the contrast, not only between ethnic groups, the Polish and the Irish. The Irish had come much earlier and succeeded and had moved uptown to the Highlands. But it also looks at the economics of Holyoke, where the downtown was where the immigrants would first come, and they would succeed after a couple decades and move uptown. So she would talk about the life of the people uptown and downtown. And we're going to go now to see the Far Alpaca, where her father was a sorter. The Far Alpaca is a mill that makes, by its name, alpaca wood. Alpaca is an animal that has very good wool on its surface, and the wool was so fine that they used it. It didn't get wet in any cases. And now her father was a sorter, which is a decent enough job to make a life. Of course, it's not the best of life, but as he got promoted through the years, he ended up getting a better job and going up to the Highlands with the family. Now, this place, the Far Alpaca, is by far the largest mill in Holyoke. It had 3,000 people working at it in any given week. It had 3 mills. Even the best of mills around Holyoke had 1 or 2 mills. This is the only mill that had 3 mills, and 2 were side by side, and then 1 was more towards South Holyoke. Mill number 1 and 2 are now gone. Mill number 3 is still there, and we'll pass by it. And we also pass by the canal because that was the source of the energy for the far alpacas. Okay, now the far alpaca is on your right hand side. It's this big mill right here. It's being rehabbed at this point in the apartments. He was a sorter, so that means he probably did work in this far alpaca number 3. And that would fit the timeline of far alpaca company making this mill. And she would often talk about the canal and how many mills there were along the canal. And she would examine the life of the people and what they looked like. She was very positive in the beginning. As long as she was very young and the family was together, she seemed to be a very happy child. Now, after the right is the location for far alpaca mill number 1. It's not there anymore, but it's the home now of the computer center and of a chemical center. But that's where her father probably was working for the rest of his life. All right, and then the last thing that she mentioned, and we're gonna break this tour into 2 pieces because it's very long. It would take you in a car about an hour, by bike about 2 hours, but on foot maybe about 4 hours. So, and we've done every stop into an individual tour, and you can do the same. Get out of your car. Now, the last piece is the second half is going to be visited up in the Highlands, so you can see how her life was drastically different. And her original house was on Hamden Street, very near Linden Street. And one of the last things she mentioned about downtown was that she loved going off to the Holyoke Library, and we're going to pass by the Holyoke Library. And actually, when she was an older teenage person in early 20s, has a summer job during her college years, she worked in the Holyoke Public Library. And so that's a great place, and I don't put it as one of the major stops, but what I do is I put it as a rest stop for you. Okay, and the park for the library is on your right, and the library itself is on your right too. Okay, so we're going to stop for a minute, and we'll do it on the part 2 as a separate video. Thank you.